Today we're with Congressman Jim Costa from Central California. We've been at an IDFA meeting at Hilmar Cheese. I expect trade was on the agenda today for discussion. Can you give us a few highlights of particularly where USMCA stands and maybe some of the other trade issues that you're dealing with?
Well, IDFA and the Hilmar family here are wonderful representatives of America's dairy industry. And between my colleagues, Congressman Harder and Cox, we represent a large share of America's dairy industry here in California. Trade is critical. While it's for the dairy industry in the country, it's 40% of dairy trade in the country. In California, with the #1 agricultural state in the nation, trade is 44% of California's production. And since dairy is the #1 agricultural product in California, it's big. The trade exports to Mexico and the agreements in USMCA with Canada on dairy, while not as much as we might like, still is progress. So therefore, it's important that we pass this trade agreement. And we had a good discussion as what we think are the remaining obstacles as it relates to Mexico putting money in their budget to enforce the labor standards, the challenges on some of the environmental enforcement with problems that we've had historically with discharges of raw sewage into the Pacific Ocean and Tijuana, and problems in the New River with pesticides and other kinds of things. We think there's some ways we can help Mexico finance improvements so that they can comply with the environmental issues. And we think the biomedical efforts have been worked out. This is something that I think that there's bipartisan support for, and I know the Speaker would like to be able to get us into place so that we can pass it before the end of the year. There's been, notwithstanding all the other kerfuffle that's taking place in Washington, trade is one of those things, along with, we think, possibly some immigration reform and maybe the reduction of prescription drugs are things that we can and should get done, along with passing a budget.
We have to ask you just one question. We hear lots of questions about the terminology for milk and what's the proper terminology for milk and the makeup for milk. You may be in somewhat of you and your colleagues may be in something of a unique situation, since among your constituents are large groups of almond farmers too. How do you sort out that issue, if we could ask?
Well, I don't know if the agricultural community can reach some sort of an agreement on that. Clearly, the definition under federal law is that milk is obtained from a lactating animal. So the definition's very clear in the USDA code. Although, like a lot of branding that takes place, not only in this country but around the world, there are liberties taken as to how products are marketed. And with California producing 70% of the almond production in the entire world, there's obviously a conflict. We have the #1 dairy state of the nation, California, and we have the #1 almond producing state in the nation, California. And so I do have some dairymen that also grow almonds. So they have a real conflict. So I don't know that it's something, and there are other there are other products that advertise themselves as milk products that obviously do not come from lactating animals. And so it's something that we need to try to sort ourselves out. I think one of the things that we can do when we talk about the incredible changes in the technology and the nutrition standards for milk and milk products, nature's best food, that we ensure that the milk products that we consume in this country use the most amount of nutrients possible. California has a standard that requires that level of nutrient product in the milk, and it tastes better. If we could have a nationwide standard like that, we'd be using more milk product.
I think those of us in the dairy industry would completely agree with that recommendation from here in California. We've been speaking today with Congressman Jim Costa from California.
A third-generation dairy family and chairman of the subcommittee on livestock and foreign agriculture. So it's a very important subcommittee that I chair because our principal areas are dairy, beef, poultry, and pork. But of course, in California, it's dairy and poultry and are the largest. So we work on it full time.
Beef is important too here in California.
Grow some wonderful beef here in the San Joaquin Valley, and I'm a product of that beef production.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I'm Joel Hastings for dairybusiness.com.